Today on LawNext, a conversation with Josh Becker, the chairman and former CEO of the legal analytics company Lex Machina and the head of analytics strategy for LexisNexis, which owns Lex Machina. And we're talking literally on the day of his departure from the legal tech world, or at least largely from the legal tech world, as he pursues his campaign for election to the California State Senate. We'll get to today's interview in just a moment. But first, let's hear from the sponsors who generously support LawNext. And now, on to this week's interview. So, Josh Becker, welcome to LawNext.
Bob, thank you. I've enjoyed our conversations over the years and looking forward to the conversation today.
Yeah, we have had a number of conversations over the years.
Yes, we have.
So, Josh, I want to talk about your career up to this point, but first of all, I'm just curious, what made you want to run for Senate?
Well, I think at this time in our country, we need innovative ideas, and that's kind of my background, is supporting innovative ideas in the for-profit, nonprofit, and actually in the public sector as well. And I think that the background that I have gives me a great experience base for which to go up to Sacramento and hopefully be effective in creating policy around climate change, education, and criminal justice reform in a state as large as California, where it can have a big impact.
I was looking at your campaign website, and you've got quite a slew of prominent endorsements. So that's a good thing. It must be a little bit strange campaigning in this pandemic environment and in this political environment.
Yeah, well, everything's strange in this COVID environment. As you know, we did a conversation, and I've done several others with law leaders and innovation leaders, and everybody's in their homes and got their home background and kids running around. So right. Yeah, everything's weird. It's weird to campaign. I think in terms of the political environment, it's actually an exciting time to campaign because people are really excited about people that have an ability or interest in bringing folks together to kind of support innovative ideas in some of the areas that I mentioned. So it's actually a really exciting time to campaign.
So I wonder if we can just kind of go back quickly a little bit through your career. You got both a JD and an MBA from Stanford at pretty much the same time. Did you always have an interest in combining law and business, or did you see one of those degrees as kind of ancillary to the other?
No, actually, I had no interest in business whatsoever, and in fact, I had a negative image of business in general. I was always interested in law, public policy. My dad was a law professor, and that's really, even when I was applying for law, public policy schools. The only reason I applied to Stanford is because they didn't have a traditional government school. And I found out that you could get a certificate in public management at the business school where my friend was. So he encouraged me to apply to that. And I did. And ultimately, it was, making the decision between law policy, law business. And I was coming from Capitol Hill, actually. I was a press secretary on the Hill. So I figured I'd seen policy up front, a little bit, and business school would be like medicine. I wouldn't enjoy it, but it would be good for me.
Yeah. But you went into business after you got out of law school, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah. Short stories. When the woman I was working for lost in actually way back in '94, and so I had 10 months to kill. Got involved with starting an early internet company, and by the time I came out, I was in Silicon Valley and sort of the heart of this early innovation in the internet, and lots of incredible ideas and inventions. And I just got really caught up in the entrepreneurial spirit. So I really just loved being part of the whole entrepreneurial intersection, from starting companies to funding companies, and ultimately got to combine legal with entrepreneurship. And that, brings us to our conversation. And that's been an amazing 9 years.
Right. Well, you came to Lex Machina in 2011 as its CEO. How did you get hooked up with them? How did you get involved with the company?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. It's an interesting time. We had about 4 months of cash. It had been seed funded by the Stanford Angels and Entrepreneurs. It was the first company funded by a new angel group, and Miriam Rivera was one of the founders of it, and she'd been the deputy general counsel at Google and helped take Google public. And she had this desire for more data to make decisions based on. And then her husband, Clint Corver, and Clint has a PhD in decision science and was one actually on the board at the time. And I met Clint and I got involved with the Stanford Angels with both of them. And then Clint said, "Hey, how'd you like to be interim CEO of this company?" And, I was immediately excited about the idea and the potential. There was a number of things, including the fact that we had very, very little cash left, which
Right.
gave me a bunch of concern. But they Clint and Miriam talked me into it.
Yeah. And what interested you about it? What intrigued you about it?
Well, I mentioned sort of my history in innovation
Yeah.
by that point, and I'd been at a top VC fund. I'd started my own venture capital fund, investing only things with a social mission. And here's a company with a deep social mission. Had
Yeah.
been a public interest project at Stanford Law
Yes.
School.
Yeah.
With this deep social mission and a chance to really have a big impact on law, which I cared a lot about, and all about openness and transparency. And I felt, okay, great. Well, here's my chance to put some of what I've been talking about into action, and I'll admit, and for myself too, was a chance to be a CEO and to take on that role and see how I would do. So that was an attractive piece of it as well, despite the many challenges I was walking into.
Right. Well, so they didn't have a lot of cash at the time, you said, but what was the state of the development of the product and of the company at that point?
Yeah, we did have a working prototype. What was amazing about the company is Andrew Ng, who was, even back then in 2011, they told me was one of the top 3 machine learning folks in the world. But I'm not sure a lot of people knew that name. Now he's widely regarded, certainly as one of the very top machine learning people in the world. And Chris Manning, who was one of the top natural language processing folks in the world. So they were professors at Stanford, but they devoted some time. They were advisors. So there was core technology and a working system. Ultimately, we did have to rebuild the product, as often happens in startups. But there was a working prototype, and so it was enough to be able to sign up some initial customers, and enough certainly for me to say, hey, I think we can take this and build this. And I'll say the term big data was a very nascent term at the time, and it hit, as happens in Silicon Valley, something becomes and then becomes overused and people don't use it anymore.
Right.
But at the time I was talking to my friend James Cham, and he said, well, yeah, you should call this big data for law. And I'm like, okay, that sounds good, let's do that. So like,
Yeah.
great, we're doing big data for law.
Yeah. Although maybe a catcher. I remember I talked to you for an interview back in 2018 where you were talking about Moneyball for lawyers, which might be something that people got more easily.
Yeah, sure. And probably Owen Bird, who I brought on shortly after I joined, and probably
Sure.
gets credit for that, being a big baseball fan, and we had the movie, and that sort of became
Yeah.
kind of part of the zeitgeist. So yeah, that was part of it, and yes, I think that did help communicate. I remember in all my VC pitches, I would use the Philadelphia Phillies as an example because I said, they had Jimmy Rollins and Ryan Howard, but at the time they were out of 120 sports franchises, they were rated dead last for use of analytics, and I said, eventually this is going to catch up to them, and sure enough, they've missed the playoffs now 9 years in a row. So
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Um, what was it like? Was it difficult in those early days trying to get customers or potential customers anyway to understand what it was you did and what it could do for them as legal practitioners?
Yeah, very hard, very hard. But what was compelling, and what I learned, and what I always try to tell our startups in our legal tech accelerator is, it's all about finding those in law. It's all about finding those key use cases. You have to find those use cases that can demonstrate that are going to save time, save money, or offer some kind of new service that didn't exist before. But you have to have those concrete use cases, and if you have them, you can make progress, even though it does take time in our industry, to get adoption. But fortunately, we had people like Jim Yoon at Wilson Sonsini, Rick Frankel at Latham. We had some kind of Sasha Rao, some early visionary people that kind of saw the power, But if it wasn't for them, we would have been dead because it took, lawyers like them who could embrace it, who then we could tell their story. Then we're no longer telling our story. We can tell, hey, great, here's a success story. Here's, how they use it. And then we could, John Johnson, I remember Fish and folks at companies, then we could tell their stories. And that was key.
Yeah. I remember that you would talk about, especially in those earlier days, several different use cases. Some related to marketing, some related to litigation strategy. What were the ones that proved to be most compelling to potential customers?
Well, I think it was both. We always saw it ultimately as useful in litigation itself, right? And people like
Right.
Jim, you and Rick, they clearly saw that, but very often to sell it, to market the company, to the product to law firms, we would, in order to actually spend money, we would champion some of the business development use cases, right? That this is a marketing, this helps you pitch and win business. And same thing, I guess, for companies as well. We said, hey, great, this will help you do litigation better. And same thing for our nonprofit users, is going to help you do litigation better. But not only that, it's also going to help you save money because it'll help you do better selection of attorneys, of outside counsel to help you. So it was a little bit of both, but we're able to use that other use case to get in the door.
Yeah. So what were the obstacles? What were the challenges that you faced in those, sort of pre LexisNexis days, before you were acquired, and you were eventually acquired by LexisNexis in 2015? But in those earlier days, what were the challenges or obstacles you faced to growing that business?
Well, I'd say three things. There's a lot of stuff we talked about, but first of all, it was just getting adoption, right? To, again, hand by hand combat, getting
Right.
one person, another person, but really getting that adoption and getting over the challenges that we had. I know, we used to talk about, Josh Walker used to say, we're selling history. We're not selling analytics or data. We're just selling history. So we could put a nice, face on it. But secondly was the funding. It takes a lot of money, and oftentimes in legal technology. And for us, we had to buy Pacer data. And in these cases, and it's great that Pacer exists, but it's a very awkward system and costs a lot. If you want to buy one case for $5-10, that's fine. But if you want to buy a million cases, not quite so easy.
Right.
And all the associated documents. And so being able to convince investors that this was, a big enough opportunity for them to invest in. Not only that it was important that we could sell it, but it was big enough. Luckily we had some folks like Jerry Yang, famous, who founder of Yahoo, and he was an early seed investor and bought into it. But so we had some people, but we had to keep telling that story, and that's a challenge. We of course work through within our legal tech accelerators, just being able to raise money in this space, especially enough to just even have a basic product, because you need those documents to do it.
Yeah, and your business relied on getting that data. If you didn't have the data, you didn't have a business.
Right.
Yeah.
And data is documents, which people don't always realize. But yeah, ultimately, the data is coming from the documents. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Well, out of the Pacer database and the filings there, litigation filings out of Pacer. So you did.
Right, but the key point.
The
key point, just to say again, it's not just the headings, right? It's like you have to be able to go in, and that's what's always separated. As we anytime you prove out an industry, other people say, oh yeah, we have this too, right? But they haven't done the hard work that we have to, and I'm just proud of Lex Machina team, to dive deep into those documents, to do all the tagging, to say, so that you can search for, this kind of case in front of this judge with this kind of employment case or this kind of torts case, to do that hard work.
Yeah. Yeah, and you had an article, a guest post on my blog at some point
Yes.
on the fact that not all data analytics are created equal, and that was kind of the point that you made, which was that you guys are doing stuff with this data that you get that makes it that much more valuable and useful to your customers.
Yeah.
So just jumping ahead, in 2015, you were acquired by LexisNexis. And what drove that? Why did that deal make sense for you, and why did it make sense for LexisNexis?
It made sense for us part of the reason we talked about it. We saw the chance to dramatically expand and to get access to Pacer documents. And I just logged on Lex Machina this morning. I remember, when we had 30,000 patent cases, ultimately 50,000 patent cases, and in the system, and what an incredible, moment that was for us. And I just logged in today, and there's 2.8 million federal district court cases, another 1.4 million state course cases, and over 100 million documents, in the system. And so, we saw the potential. LexisNexis. It was a very tough, probably the hardest decision of my life, honestly. And I lost many sleepless nights. I was like the character in Silicon Valley who kept waking up in cold sweats every morning because we had a Series B term sheet for $10 million, and we could have, worked to continue to grow the company. And then, we saw this opportunity with LexisNexis. But, they had a track record, for example, with Law 360, where they had taken a company, really left it alone and let it grow, and let the current team grow it. And so that gave us a lot of confidence in Mike Walsh and Sean Fitzpatrick and the team. And we ultimately decided, this was the best chance for us to succeed in fulfilling our vision, to provide openness and transparency at the law. And so ultimately, it was about the vision, and this path made the most sense.
Yeah. And do you feel that vision has been served since the acquisition? Are you happy with how the product has developed, and to the extent to which it's been integrated into other LexisNexis products over the years? And I realize you're still there, and and you might not give me a totally blunt answer, but
well, I think I can give you a pretty blunt answer, considering I've got another few hours left. But
they're going to cancel your party, your going away party is.
Right, exactly. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's, there's a reason. And Carl Harris, who was my number two, runs Lex Machina. I mean, basically the whole core, and Jörg, who you've dealt with, our head of marketing, basically the whole core team is there. And the whole core Ravel team, which they also acquired, is still around. And I think that's really tough, because I've done post-merger integration from the other side. It's hard to do, and it's hard to get right. And there's plenty of reason to be skeptical, as I tell and even working with legal tech big legal tech companies. In fact, we passed an opportunity to work with Lexis, several years before, and I'm glad we did, because it probably would have killed us in that kind of partnership context. But in terms of being part of Lexis, it was an incredible opportunity, and just feel really great about accomplishing the mission. As we say, we're trying to do something never been done before, blending technology and human legal expertise, to build this outcomes-oriented map of litigation that hadn't existed, and we're doing it.
Yeah, you really were also quite a bit ahead of the curve, I think, with Lex Machina, and probably with LexisNexis as well. Again, I interviewed you a couple of years ago when LexisNexis kind of launched its analytics suite, and you talked about putting a stake in the ground to carve out the space around analytics for the company. I mean, the analytics use and understanding and appreciation of analytics has changed dramatically since you went to Lex Machina 9 years ago. But you still have managed to really hold kind of a lead in that area, it seems like.
Yeah, again, I think a tribute to the team and the Lex Machina team sticking around, and the Lexis team working with them and providing the opportunity for expansion. And now with Lexis Plus, it's actually kind of a fitting time to be going, because there'll be core parts of analytics integrated into Lexis Plus that'll expose it to hundreds of thousands, millions of more users. which is incredibly exciting. So,
Yeah.
as we used to say back when we trademarked the term legal analytics, which it's like, it's very rare you get to really create a category and have the chance to do that. So, we feel really good. I mean, I had a call yesterday with someone from a legal tech accelerator company, called Motionize, and he said, it was because of Lex Machina, it was because of you that I wanted to do this, that I wanted to go do this company. And so, that feels really great as well.
Yeah. We'll get back to my interview in just a moment. But first, let's take a break to hear from the sponsors who generously support LawNext. Now, let's get back to this week's interview. So, as you mentioned earlier, you're still going to be involved with the legal tech, the Legal Tech Accelerator program that LexisNexis runs. You've been kind of running it, and it's under the auspices of LexisNexis. You're going to finish out this cohort, and then, or will you continue after that as well, or?
I'll probably as a special guest, but
Yeah.
I won't have any formal role. But yeah, it'll be in good hands with Jeff Pfeiffer, who, well, Jeff's incredible, and I think one of the reasons everyone stuck around so long. He's just a great guy. He's deeply committed to it. And Owen Bird, from the Lex Machina side. So they'll continue to do it. And by the way, as is Mike, Mike loves it because Mike was a startup guy early in his career, so he loves having exposure to all the startups. So it's a lot of fun. I think it'll be in good hands.
Yeah. So I just wonder if I could ask a little bit about a couple of your insights from having worked in the industry these 9 years and having commanded this company as it grew from a startup and was acquired. If you were starting today at Lex Machina with the benefit of everything you've learned over the past 9 years, is there anything you do differently?
Yeah, it's a good question. Let me think about that. While I stall and think about that question, one thing I did want to say is, and I kind of alluded to it at the beginning, but again, just deep appreciation for you and just a really small handful of others who cover innovations in the legal space and in legal technology. And if it wasn't for you and again those small handful of others, then we wouldn't have the platform to get our stories out, and these new startups wouldn't have this platform. So I'd say I've never been part of another area of entrepreneurship. I always used to say that has as much camaraderie and as the legal tech space, where people are really cheering for each other and rooting for each other, and so that's all been a lot of fun. In terms of
thank you very much for saying that. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I deeply mean it. And as I we had our talk with innovation officers, and I was saying back 9 years ago, that to even get a chance to talk to even one of them would have been like, oh my God, this is the best thing ever. So again, the people who've really supported innovation and the ecosystem is phenomenal. In terms of what I would have done differently, I can't say. I mean, I'm sure there are things I would have done. And it's funny when you look back. I mean, sort of our one of the leadership positions I mentioned, the person we ended up hiring was sort of our second choice. It ended up, God, thank God we got that second choice, because the first person didn't accept. And so sometimes you look back in hindsight and say, wow, I'm really glad that happened. But for us, it really was just kind of, a lot of it was just the intensity, day to day, keep going, keep one foot in front of the other, and then the tough decision around the acquisition opportunity, which as I said, it's very rare in life you get a chance to look back and say, was that definitely the right decision, or maybe you don't know. And like in our case, that was 1,000% the right decision, and so it's fun to look back on that.
Yeah. Well, what about turning that question a little bit around to some of the startups that you mentor? I mean, you do, through this accelerator, provide mentorship and guidance to them. What is the perhaps best advice that you give to some of these startups, or what are some of the mistakes that you commonly see them make that you try and address?
Well, it's funny. They fall into a couple buckets, and it's amazing how just one conversation with us, it can just add so much, because it's just so easy to make mistakes. The first bucket of mistakes is just around founder relationships, just not having things buttoned down. Oh, we're all getting along. We'll figure that out down the road, and just That's probably one of the top reasons startups fail is just because of conflict among the founders. Um,
Interesting.
how you think about growing, how you think about, adding investors and the rights that they have and building a board. I mean, that's another area where it's really easy just to make mistakes in pitching for raising money. There's just certain red flags that investors look for that I know since I've been on both sides. And it's just really easy to say, oh, that's a red flag. Investors are always looking for reason to say no because they see many more companies that they can fund. And it's just if there's that red flag, not going to happen. So it's funny. It's a lot of things like that, and then really about product market fit, right? And figuring out how to find product market fit and figure out if you have it, and figure out how then to hire that initial salesperson and then work to grow the team. So that's those are sort of really but you can make it's really easy to make potentially fatal mistakes in each of those areas early on.
Yeah, and you were just talking about this sort of this community that exists within the legal tech world, and on the Tech Accelerator program website. You talk a lot about the website talks a lot about the sort of the need the building this community around this community of entrepreneurs and getting entrepreneurs involved with each other. How important is that to an entrepreneur to have that kind of support from others working in the field?
I think it's really important. And we say they oftentimes they learn as much from each other as they do from us. Um, and in many cases, we're just sort of facilitating that space for them to get together
Yeah.
to do that. But we often have folks come back. Unfortunately, we can't meet in person. But Ryan Alchuk from Ping
Yeah.
spoke to the group, and he's so dynamic and inspiring, and talked about what he got from the accelerator and just some of the things he's learned along the way. So we often have folks like that come back and share. But yeah, it's just having someone who's kind of going through what you're going through can be really helpful.
Yeah. Do you have any thoughts on and I know we're running short on time here, but just a couple of questions I wanted to ask before we finish up. One
Sure.
is just on the question of diversity in legal tech. You've probably seen
Yeah.
Kristen Sonde has done some research into this, and some others have done some research which show that there's a real dearth of women and a dearth of people of color in legal tech. Have you, through this accelerator program or LexisNexis or just on your own, have any thoughts about how we enhance diversity?
Yeah, I think it's really important, and I think it's happening. And I think we all have a role to play. I think if you look at our current cohort and certainly our last couple cohorts, really diverse in terms of women founders, in terms of ethnicity, and that's great. And it's something we really do embrace. And I think our accelerator's been better for it, and the industry's better for it. So I think we all have again a role to play. Myself, I have a role in terms of mentoring diverse entrepreneurs, in terms of investors, in terms of funding diverse entrepreneurs, in terms of you covering diverse entrepreneurs, and in companies like Lexis and Westlaw and others in terms of promoting people and making sure that there's role models in leadership as well.
Yeah, you're leaving this world of legal tech, or at least partly leaving this world of legal tech at a time that's one of great challenge and transition for many in the legal profession and certainly in the legal tech world. What are your thoughts about how this is going to affect us going forward? What changes are we going to see?
In terms of COVID, you're talking about specifically, or yeah. Well, gosh, we could do, and we already have in the past, but we could do another hour on that. But it's, I will say, my conversations with managing partners and chief innovation officers. I mean, in many cases, it's been we've seen an acceleration of innovation as more people are at their desks, more people, not literally at their desks, but if they're at their computers, they're more open for training to learn new systems. Learn Lexis Plus. They've had the best launch of a new product they've had, or in terms of learning analytics, maybe even putting off for a while. Hey, I keep hearing about this thing. Now I'm going to take the time to learn about it. And had Paul Weiser talking about their associates committee that's gotten deeply involved in innovation. So I think it's actually for innovation, it's there's some opportunities for people to, because people have to do things differently. On the other hand, you can't in times of change. I was talking to Oz, who's now at Simpson, and you can't. In times of people can only take so much change, right? So you have to be kind of careful how much change that you try to encourage people sort of to do. So I think that's an interesting area, but also again for legal tech, with all the accelerators that we're seeing, and Duke Law School also has a great accelerator, and we work closely with them, and also, by the way, has great diversity among their entrepreneurs. And I'm really excited at the state level to work for both. Again, increase openness and transparency in California is not great in terms of openness to legal data and to records, as well as in terms of access to justice. And we've got a number of great access to justice companies right now in our accelerator. And I think there's a real opportunity to increase access to justice with some of the new technologies that are coming up. So I think it's a scary time. It's a difficult time, but it's also a bit of a hopeful time for innovation.
Yeah, and setting aside COVID, which a lot of people are saying has sort of accelerated our adoption of legal technology or use of technology, just over the course of the 9 years or almost 10 years that you've been working in the legal technology space, have you seen a change in the legal profession's acceptance of technology or sophistication about technology?
Yeah, I'd say, we have. I mean, again, it starts from the stories of COVID, where you've got partners that at their homes now saying, wait, I can see my desktop from work. Like, yeah, we've been telling you that for years.
Right,
You can
yeah.
do that. So, I think there is, and again, plus the, folks who, young folks who are now making partners, who are running, legal nonprofits, and are emerging up through the ranks, they have a bit of a different relationship with technology. My dad was of the generation, that, you were not going to get him off of Word perfect. I don't think there was any chance, that was going to happen. But there is, and all the, on all the books in his office. But yeah, there is a increasing, I think, acceptance of technology, and and a way to look and just say, again, how can we do things better? How can we, from the law firm perspective, how can we provide more value to our clients? From the company perspective, to say, hey, we haven't really invested in technology in the legal space internally. How can we, do that to accomplish our goals more? And again, from the public sector, to say, okay, maybe we should use this technology to open up and create more access to justice.
Yeah. Well, Josh, I want to thank you for everything you've done to mentor startups, to educate the legal profession as a whole about technology, about analytics, and all the contributions you've made over these years. And I hope we see you back in the legal tech world sometime down the road, or in the White House. That would work too.
Well, thank you, Bob. Again, thank you for all you've done to help promote innovation in the legal world, and thanks for having me on.
Yeah, great. It's been great to talk to you, and great to get to know you over the years, and I wish you great success in this next stage of your career.
And people can go to joshbecker2020.com if they want to learn more about the campaign.
That's right. Good luck.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
See you, Josh. Good to talk to you. And that does it for today's show. I'd like to, as always, give a shout out and a thanks to Ben Ambrogi and his company Populous Radio for producing and editing today's show. A big thanks to Josh Becker for taking the time out of his busy schedule to be with us. And thanks to all of you for listening. Until next time, this is Bob Ambrogi.